back at TCAST for TARTLE. We have Dixon Jones today. Super excited. He is the CEO of Inlinks, a company specializing in semantic SEO and entity-based optimization. Dixon has an extensive background in SEO and has been instrumental in developing strategies that leverage, and we're going to get into this, guys, natural language processing, NLP, to enhance search engine optimization. He's also done several insightful articles that I read discussing topics such as entity-based SEO and evolution of semantic search. Thanks for coming on, Dixon. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you for the intro.
And I'm super excited because we're going to, I want to get into your company now so that we can make sure we'll have the links in the show notes for this. But can you tell us a little bit about Inlinks?
Yeah, so Inlinks is a technology which at its heart reads text and tokenizes it into entities. So it turns 1,000 words of text into the underlying entities that content is talking about. And it can do that ad hoc across websites, across any kind of data that you kind of give it, but websites is what we do. And then we can use that to build out knowledge graphs of a brand's website. So instead of having, let's say you got 1,000 pages on the website or 100 pages on the website, let's not get silly, 100 pages on the website, 1,000 pages, that's 100,000 words of stuff all jumbled over the place. But the things that you're talking about repeat themselves. So when you get down to the heart of things, you turn everything into a Wikipedia article, for example, and all the different Wikipedia articles that it would refer to. So climbing being a Wikipedia article, or, Nike being a Wikipedia article, or whatever. Think about an entity in that kind of way. Then a knowledge graph becomes a really good representation of like a fingerprint for a brand or a fingerprint for a page of content. And so you can use that then to work out what to start talking about next to extend your brand within an authoritative marketplace, becoming an authority within marketplace. You can use it to write content and say, right, I want to be the expert in choose keyword here. Well, you need to then read all the other people that are already experts, turn that and tokenize all that into entities, and then understand it so you don't miss out important parts of the content that you need to write about and that kind of thing. So that's kind of how it works on a top level. And I don't really want to go too much into that because I'll bore the pants off of anybody that isn't into SEO and NLP.
Yeah, but I do think, and I think a lot of people are interested. We have a lot of business leaders that listen to this on the tech side. What is your opinion, especially with AI tools? How are they reshaping SEO?
Massively. I mean, the SEO industry is taking a temporarily hiatus, a bit of a hit. I've been doing SEO since 1999. So, a lot of kids weren't born when I started doing this stuff. So it's not a new industry now.
Right.
And I turned 60 in November. A lot of changes. And with ChatGPT, it was very clear that the world was going to change. To me, anyway, it was very clear that people would start to search using natural language processing instead of using, generative AI. So typing questions into machines that are going to give the full answer, not just point you to a web page for the answer, which fundamentally is problematic for a company or an industry that's charged with getting people from their query to the customer's website or the employer's website or whoever it may be, or their own website. Things were going to change, but it takes a bit of time for these big ships to move. Google particularly, because that was the one at the top. Now, Google tried a few times to start bringing in LLMs, large language models, basically ChatGPT clones, they call it Gemini, into their products. And they've kind of started to get there now. They've got a thing called AI overviews, which I'm sure most people have started to see, that are starting to summarize things. And it looks like they're summarizing the search results that are underneath, but that's not entirely true. The information is coming from a deeper learning set, and then it can get it's called RAG, retrieval augmented generative search. So it kind of like takes that sort of search results as a secondary data source, really. So it's kind of an interesting change, but it means that it's really hard to track what's happening in the AI world. Does the AI understand your brand? Does it understand it in context? What do you do about it if it doesn't? So the whole of that industry is going to change, but I think it's no different to the banking industry or the doctors and the surgeons, and everybody's going to change. I remember going to an optician earlier this year, and the optician was explaining how, the machine had already machine learned all of the people with chlamydia. I've got chlamydia historically in my family. Yes, sorry.
I was like,
It's all right. You can leave that into the thing. That's all right. Everybody makes a. Okay, I haven't got chlamydia. I have got glaucoma in the family.
I'm like, hey, we're being honest and truthful today. This is awesome.
The machine can can see that so much better than a human being can.
Mhm.
So it means that the doctors and the banks and everybody is gonna be in for a turmoil. It's just that I'm at the front of it and I see it for myself and have to deal with it. But it is also a land of opportunity at that point because, clearly the world is going to carry on moving forward, and clearly brands are still going to want to get their message through the noise out to the end customer. So the rules have changed, the game has changed, and understanding how that shift has happened, I think it is really interesting. And not yet sure. I'm not sure, but it's something I spend half my days thinking about.
Yeah, and that's something you had shared with me offline that your upcoming book tackles the changing face of power in the
Yeah.
modern age of AI and LLM.
Yeah. So I
What
so
does
so
that mean, like when you say
Mhm.
changing face of power?
So I start with Brit. So I start with Henry VIII. My wife is obsessed with Henry VIII and really interested in the power situation during the Tudors. Not just Henry VIII, but then Queen Elizabeth when she was effectively controlling the balance of power in Europe and stuff. So,
Mhm.
but Henry's way of controlling is very, very similar to Putin's way of controlling in the way that they're very autocratic in their nature and the systems. And Henry has a star chamber, which is kind of like an out of the court outside the regular court system. And the dissolution of the monasteries is how he started to control the power through the churches. He broke away from the Catholic Church. Putin also uses the Orthodox Church in Russia
Mhm.
quite significantly as well. So there's a lot of similarities in there in today's world, and I kind of think, well, okay, so the way in which we used to see power and the way you see power now, yes, it's okay, but here comes this Chat GPT thing, and all of a sudden, well, frankly, when I started to write this, it was before you had your current government in there. It's before Elon took an interest in world politics. And it's not just your politics, by the way. He's taken interest in our politics. I saw him with the president of Argentina, unless it was a deep fake, I don't know. It's changed. The business people that control the information is largely about controlling the information. And the ownership of that information is really changed, and how that impacts our world as individuals and how we manage that as human beings, I think is going to be very, very interesting. Not just in the West, but it's interesting that, culturally in China, for example, they're very used to a society that, works within a rules where they expect somebody to be listening in on what they're doing. We're not used to that so much in the West, and we kind of argue it. But we have to carry around these mobile phones that are listening to us, tracking everything that we do. Even before that, your Visa card pretty much told you everything that you were buying everywhere and where it was. So the ways in which we can be tracked has been huge for a long, long time. And then the way that the LLMs themselves potentially can be changing the power as well. So we're we're already over trusting the answers from
Mhm.
LLMs. We know that they can hallucinate. We know that they can say completely the wrong things. But then we as human beings have collectively done that for a long, long time as well. There's a saying in the UK that carrots make you see in the dark,
Mhm.
which we all believe as kids. We all think that was true. And the reason that it came about, turns out, is because during World War II, Winston Churchill wanted to hide the fact that we had radar, put out a news report that carrots, our pilots all had carrots, ate carrots, and they could see in the dark. And that just, they hoped the Germans would see it and
Right.
bypass the fact that there was these massive, great big radars on the coast. I don't know. But this is how false information starts to take off. Now, that will get put into a training set for an LLM, and then that will take us off into another, the LLM can potentially hallucinate. And it's not trying to hallucinate, it's trying to match the training data that it's got and build on it. So I think it's very interesting what is going to change in the power play between governments, individuals, businesses, and the technology itself. And, with the potential AGI, artificial general intelligence, that potentially they could decide that they don't like their masters. So I think that's a long shot, paranoia kind of viewpoint. But
Mhm.
it doesn't detract from the fact that this world is changing very, very fast. Power structures are changing incredibly fast. And writing the book, what I'm trying to do is understand it myself so
Mhm.
that I don't become personally irrelevant in my, in my old age. And that's really what I'm trying to do. If anybody else reads it and wants to enjoy it as well, that'll be great. I've got to finish it first. But I think it's an interesting place to explore. It won't be very long. My last book was only 70 pages. So,
Do you think, Dixon, I mean, like when we looked at centralizing power, like back in the day, like we'll take 1940s, you were talking about propaganda. You had governments, you had corporations, and then you had, the media, the news media, which was traditional. ABC, CBS for you guys, BBC, Now we talk about decentralization, but in reality, the AIs and the LLMs, with this amplification that you were talking about, doesn't that centralize the power in ways we've never seen
it
before?
depends on how you talk about decentralization, because so I've got a whole chapter on decentralization because I think it's an interesting way to combat power. And I guess cryptocurrency is the obvious one that we kind of see. And the idea of that is that you're taking away the power, but you're taking the money supply away from a government and then putting it into the hands of somebody else. You know what? It's not cheap to transfer that currency, that
Oh, yeah,
cryptocurrency from
exactly.
one medium to another. So someone's taking a cut every single way. So your power is diminished by the cryptocurrency that you use. And cryptocurrency or separate currencies are not a new thing. The East India Company, which is a British company that was formed shortly after Elizabeth's time, when they took over, pretty much used it to take over India and the world and America for their little bit, until you kicked us out with your Boston Harbor Tea Party. So the East India Company paid all their employees largely in their own little currency, where you could only buy things that were made or bought in from the East India Company. So they were pretty much tying people into a system. They may have been freeing them from the currency of the day in whichever country they were in, tying them into having to work for the East India Company. So money itself has an interesting power. And if you decentralize it, that's fine. But if you're controlling the mechanism whereby people exchange it, then there is still somebody else with that power in there. Now, it's decentralized. The whole point of it is that nobody has that power. It's just a register that goes around all the different systems. But hey, you cannot change your currency from Bitcoin to cash and then back to Bitcoin and have the same amount of money every time. It's a big chunk taken out. So decentralization has some possibilities. Talk about other things about decentralized government structures that are being played around with. Apparently in Nevada, they're trying to do some stuff there. Just don't really understand those, but I think they're kind of new. But you're absolutely right. AI itself is actually centralizing all that information. So when it comes to knowledge, that's currently getting centralized in a way where when it was split amongst 4 billion individuals, it was pretty split. When it all comes down into one machine, one Borg, then it's pretty centralized, and then it becomes pretty hard to change the narrative.
Yeah, and when you democratize knowledge, and then you turn around and now we have, because everybody's talking about, we're so excited, the new technologies, we're going to decentralize. But then you see these new gatekeepers coming in this age. What are the biggest risks and opportunities you foresee?
Well, the biggest risk is that we don't see the gatekeeper until too late. We kind of,
Okay.
and I think that's kind of happened in a bunch of ways already. And I guess that's always the way. I also accept that most of the time, once it's got there, we can't do very much about it as individuals, unless
Right.
we're going to cut ourselves off the grid and be one of those survivalists with that's going to rely on cans of gasoline. Although the cans of gasoline is still controlled by a power base. So unless you've got your own well. So the risks are that you don't understand the danger until it's too late. It happened with mobile phones coming on. It's happened with all sorts of things. Progressively over time, the information base is getting centralized ever since the advent of television, and before that. I think that's the real danger. The opportunity is that it means that the power is getting sucked into a relatively small number of people. But these people are not necessarily the ones with the money, and they're not necessarily the ones with the traditional power, the police force or the army on their backsides. But the nerds can be the ones with the power as well. So the opportunities are there of finding your piece of power. You don't need the whole thing. You don't need the whole thing. You have to be able to defend your position. When I was doing an MBA, there was this case study, which I'm sure lots of MBAs have, where there's two two ice cream sellers on a beach, and day one, they go 1/3, 1/3. So basically, the one's a third of the way down the beach, the other's 2/3 of the way down the beach. So they've both got the same amount of footfall. Then, as soon as one realizes, if they move up to the halfway line or further up, then they're going to get everybody on the other half and half of the other person's. So the other one moves closer and closer, and this is why we end up getting loads of shops of the same sorts in the same place, apparently. But what's happening is that people are trying to get their bit of power. So if you didn't pay attention to that and you're stuck at the end of the beach, and then the other guy is getting all of the footfall traffic. So you need to find a place to defend your position. It's the same with running any business from scratch. You need a defensible position. You need to get your USP, as I used to call it. I think we need to think about that in terms of power. You don't need to take over the world, but you do need to be able to not be walked all over. Because if you don't have a hymn sheet of your own, then you're going to find yourself out of well, not out of pocket, but out of sorts. You're not going to know what to do with yourself because the machines are going to tell you, or the people that are running are going to tell you. So I'm getting philosophical, but
I love that. That's what
I'm
we
thinking
do.
about it all at the moment. I think, and I can't pretend that, I've spent my life studying military warfare and stuff. Although I know my bit, and I think I know more than my share. But I did start reading about power and how that works, quite a while back. And it's definitely changed. It's definitely changed. So knowing that difference, I think and it's much more relevant to me now. When I was a kid, I kind of just assumed that, I was just going to start a business and off I go. Now I'm old. I realize that the world is an interesting place. There's a lot more conspiracies than there actually are. Conspiracy theories than actual conspiracies. But the ability to work out the truth from the fiction is also harder as well. And that's also a real danger.
Yeah, I want to go with you, Dixon, in a global context. Our company, we're in 226 countries, so we're always looking at, culture and stuff like that in different. Both of us are coming from countries that have been well established and have colonized underdeveloped nations. How do you see AI reshaping the balance of power when it comes to us using the technology in the developed worlds to come in these underdeveloped nations, like smart cities, all these different things? Are we taking control? Are we going to colonize them again through technology?
Yes, but not always in the ways that we think. I'm currently sitting in Antigua, and I'm not in a interesting part of Antigua. I'm in a little, very underdeveloped section of Antigua. And it's hard to see a smart city coming here, but it will arrive because it's going to be more efficient to get that here. And so something will happen that will come in there, and it will be controlled by a third party. So let's say they decide to put a big windmill, a big turbine generator in the village. That's entirely possible. That's got to be built by an outside organization. But that organization then probably controls the electricity that comes out of that. They can then control what electricity is run by each company, so they can then charge, so therefore the money flows back eventually to whoever made the infrastructure. So I think that these things, and of course they can start downloading software and things like that, suddenly decide, well, okay, this is getting paranoid now, but Joe Bloggs in number 43, being a very naughty person, we can cut off their electricity. That's potentially the sorts of things it can do. Of course, if you have your own solar panel, you get around that. You've got your own bit of power. You've got your own power base. You can do things.
And that's not conspiracy theory. We're seeing like debanking happening and all those different things.
Yes.
So I don't want people to think that. I don't want people to think that that's conspiracy, because we're seeing forms of power being used with technology, even now, with multiple different types of government.
Very much so. And it's not always at large organization level. It's also at small business levels can be controlling that way as well. And that's where the ethics seem to be getting lost quite quickly. And certainly trying to think about these rules of engagement are not, the laws are never going to catch up. And in fact, right now, laws are getting ignored in the situation. And don't get me wrong, it's having some huge benefits for society as well. We may well live longer. We may well have to work less.
Exactly.
So this isn't all bad. And to the power mongers' credit or argument, they are effectively giving everybody a longer life, better life. Than they had before. So it's not all bad, but the potential for it to turn can be very, very fast. And that's where I think we need to be mindful, and it's probably too late for that. You've either got an iPhone or an Android phone in your pocket right now. You've got
Yes.
one of
Yeah.
those. There isn't another one that you've got there. So that's two companies that effectively are communicating with you every instant of every day.
Right. And then the amount of data that they're collecting, on us
Yeah.
individuals, and then what they're
Yep.
deciding to do with that data,
Yep. And
is
even though and what's happening in third world countries as well is that they've bypassed the banks and they're using the phones for their banking. So that's a very, very big trend in third world organizations, third world countries, and that's great. But it just means, again, somebody's taking a cut on every single one of those transactions.
Yeah,
So the money's
I
flowing.
was reading an article about the harassment and unethical practices in India on these, fintechs giving loans to people. And then they turn around and they pretty much kind of own your phone, and they're calling your relatives and shaming you, if you're not making your payments and stuff. So they're
Yeah,
using
that used to happen in the
technology.
US as well. There's something on Netflix now, Bank of Dave 2, back there, which is very English, but it's a Bank of Dave. Dave was a Yorkshire guy that he basically did loans for minivans. So he was a white van man guy, and then he started lending out money to friends and stuff in Yorkshire, and basically ended up effectively building a bank or fighting the banks because they were saying that he was running an illegal bank and stuff like that. Anyway, he won, or more or less won, and it's still gone on. Anyway, so Series 2, that was mostly true. Series 2, I think, is a lot more fictional, but basically it's getting the loan shark companies, which were for a while, the American loan sharks got shut down in America, the sort of legalized ones, but they came over to the UK, and payday loans, that's the word, and payday loans pretty much they started sponsoring, the biggest football teams, soccer teams in the UK, on their shirts and stuff. And and they were taking this, 1% per day, interest rates, and people were not mathematically attuned enough to understand that 1% per day is a hell of a bad APR.
Yes. Yes.
And I'm sure that'll be happening in most of the third world as well, because the regulations aren't strong enough to stop it.
Yeah. And that brings me, and we'll wrap up with this one, the ethical challenges, with these AI systems influencing decisions at scale, and people aren't realizing the amount of scale that it can do. How do we ensure ethical and unbiased use of tools? I know you are making
Yeah.
these tools and doing things in your company. From a philosophical standpoint, what do you look at it that way?
I think the public has a part to play. I do think that reviews and stuff has a part to play. An organization gets bad reviews now that they didn't get.
Right.
That wasn't amplified back in the day. So that's good. So there is public pressure that can bring down, or at least bring pressure to bear on somebody that is starting to act unethically. And I think that, of course, you still hope that people have morals in this world, and so they are thinking ethically most of the time. But clearly, 20% of people don't think ethically in any decision making, and that's 20% of the population. Well, a sociopath apparently, and I don't know where I read this, but it's got to be true. It's got to be. I heard it on social media. It's got to be true.
Exactly.
So there are people working unethically, and the unethical practices become acceptable without anybody kind of passing it up. So I think the responsibility is not just to stand up when you see it, at least to make your point, whether it's a review or whether it's I demand my money back, or, stand out there with a banner if that's what you have to do. I think it's also a responsibility on individuals to find their own path that isn't
Yes. Yep.
influenced. You can't just go around your whole life saying you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. At some point, you've got to decide, I'm going to do what's right. And okay, that's what's right for me, my family, my community. You can use your community to help build a power base, or something, a protective area. You can think for yourself. You can not accept things at face value. You can mitigate your buying choices to a large degree, not just to what's the right thing for you, but also do I want something that is mine for life, or am I renting it
Yes.
off
Yes.
of somebody else, and these kind of things. So I think that the power does still remain within us, but fewer and fewer people are going to take the time to try and find their own voice.
Yes. Yeah. And despite all this tech, power still has a human dimension. Like you guys have amazing local pubs, where you're watching football,
Thank you very
soccer,
much.
how.
You
Yeah,
don't want to
yeah.
say that at 1 o'clock in the morning when you're coming home being sick on the out on the pavement. But yeah,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. But that's a human dimension. Yeah, I can't. No tech can. I mean, you could have robots serving
yeah,
beer,
yeah,
but other than that, you're not gonna that human creativity, intuition, collaboration, the teamwork, that feeling, with that team, that's that football team.
agree. That coming back to
How does that
community is
evolve
really important.
alongside AI? Like, what do you see the
It's going to
human
be very
element?
interesting to see how that
Hmm.
evolves, and it's going to be different for different people. But I think there will be two layers of society: the ones that get out and talk to each other,
Hmm.
and the ones that don't. And unfortunately, I think it will probably be more than half the world that finds themselves increasingly
Yes.
isolated because they're scared to get out. I mean, when I was a kid, of course I played out on the swings on my own and stuff like that. Now I think that it'd be very unusual for people to do that. Maybe in my little village in England, probably no, not so much. But even then, I think people are reticent to let kids play young and have all that freedom that at least I enjoyed, being 60,
Hmm.
when I was, 10.
Same here. Yeah.
So I think that there needs to be more communication. I think that socialization is a big hub. What makes us human is something that is going to be more important than ever. And as you say, I mean, there's a great quote, and I don't know if it's an American lady or an English lady, but she said something along the lines of, I want the AI to wash my dishes and clean and iron my clothes so that I can paint and draw. I don't want the AI to paint and draw
Hmm.
so that I can wash my clothes and
Right. Yes. Yeah.
and iron my dishes. So we're not necessarily going to buy the things that are out there at the moment, or buy into the things that are out there at the moment, unless it's convenience. But we need to do something with that extra time that we're given. If AI is to make our lives cheaper, easier, whatever, then we as individuals need to know what we're doing with that time, because that's what you live for,
Hmm.
And if you were spending your life living for the paycheck, well, that may not be the best way to look at your life as you move forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Dixon, it's been amazing. Where can people find out more about Inlinks and then stay
Okay.
updated on your upcoming book?
Well, thanks a lot. So inlinks.com, probably for the business. When I do say something like personal, like I write a book or whatever, then dixonjones.com. Dixon's with an X, dixonjones.com
Okay. So
is there
we'll
as
have those
well.
in the link. And when the
Okay,
book
lovely.
does come out, I would love to be able to be one of the
So
podcasts you
I'm
go
not
on.
in for the money, so it'll be on Kindle Unlimited, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, if you are, all right, if you are giving your money to the man, so that's the other thing. In Antigua, I'm not supposed to say that. Well, yeah, what the hell? Of course I can say this. So Jeff Bezos's boat was in the Antiguan harbor. It's the
Oh, wow.
longest sailing boat in the world.
Hmm.
$500 million worth of boat in the harbor whilst I was there. I mean, honestly,
That's a lot of
honestly.
packages.
Yeah, and that's what my Kindle
A lot of
Unlimited
cardboard.
subscription does. Yeah, that's power.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Well, thank you, Dixon. Appreciate it. Like I said, we'll have in the show notes all these links. And when the book does come out, we'd love to have you back on.
Lovely. Thanks very much, Jason.
Yes, thank you.